Welcome to the Intimate Feminine, opening channels to deeper intimacy in sex, relationship, and love. Allow yourself to sink in as everything inside you becomes beautifully and sensually unfurled.
Hi, it's Jacqueline, and this is the Intimate Feminine. My intention today is to take a pause in the telling of our story and to, from a feminine perspective, map specific points on the landscape of navigating this experience. Much of my wisdom and perspective has awakened within me because of and through the experience. Ironically, I had begun in 2016, just before all of this began to unfold, growing out my hair. At the time, I was a deep, rich brunette, and every 3 weeks, little strands of gray, this sparkling silver hairline began to grow through, and I was tired of coloring it. So I decided, what the hell? I'm going to grow it out. Unbeknownst to me, how it would look, what would come through. I actually expected wiry, old lady, kind of just very coarse gray hair to be what I would end up dealing with. Men, including my husband at the time, said, "Oof, I don't know. You're going to grow your hair out. You're going to look very old." And for anybody who is now in my world and has seen me visually, what I can tell you is that I have never felt so beautiful. And this gorgeous sort of, in some ways, dirty blonde, gray mane that has grown from my being is absolutely lovely. And I am thrilled I chose to stop coloring and grow out my hair. I bring that up because there was a woman during these years who actually said it to me, and I knew as my natural color was growing from my crown and down the sides of my hairline, of my facial contours, she said to me, this is your crown. You're crowning. I certainly didn't understand it then, but what I can tell you, one woman to another now, is that the depths of my wisdom would become initiated through this experience. And absolutely, this was a transition toward the years of the crone. I don't necessarily feel that crone energy is dependent upon your age. It's much more of an energetic, archetypal expression that settles into the bones of a woman when it is her time. I absolutely experienced fears of aging. I was engaged in relationship with this other man, and I knew that part of the attraction was a maiden or virgin energy. And because that was present within our dynamic, I constantly feared the presence of a young woman, of a true young maiden in her 20s who was beautiful and pure and fresh. And I remember having times that it ached within me to witness myself beginning to ripen, to season, and to age. And what I will tell you now, at the age of 50, almost 51, it's incredible. It's phenomenal. I don't want to be 20. I don't need to try to be 20. Certainly, there are changes within our body and our energy and our system that, those wrinkles, the way that your body changes in her tone and her movement, all are adjustments. However, aging into the wisdom and the depths of being a woman, a wise woman, the crone, is an exquisite experience and arrival. So from that place, from the wisdom of a woman who has deepened into herself, I'm going to just take a few moments to sort of look back and highlight key points for those of you who are listening, and especially for those of you who are navigating these spaces. I was a woman who, by all appearances, had everything, but I was dying inside. I did not feel I possessed my own sovereignty and power of choice. And I'm not speaking about sovereignty as the almighty woman who needs no one and is in charge of only herself and can be fine with or without relationship. What I believe is true is that we are innately, divinely designed to be deep and intimate and soul partnership. So I don't believe it is our goal to evolve to the place where we don't need the other. What I do believe is that there are varying forms of need. There is a desperate need that will do anything, will give herself up, in fact, doesn't even know who or what she is, or the massive expanse of creative energy she carries. I also feel there is a way of being fully deepened into ourselves as women, as the feminine, where we can be okay to take care, to tend to nurture, to move ourselves through life. And certainly not every woman currently has the partner she desires. So a piece of this is not relating through insecurity, through old karma, through imprints of our fathers who very often have been absent in one way or another. And this is not a conversation to make him wrong. This is a conversation to deepen into and unfurl the feminine. So one of the first things I will say is that for me, this experience offered to me sort of on a silver platter the power of my own choice in ways I had never encountered it before. And that was my sexuality, my creativity, my expression, being in a community of other spiritual beings who could deepen into that in a way that I loved. There were many beautiful things in this experience for me, and there were many movements that, were I to encounter them now, I have gained the discernment to understand the deeper energetics at play. So first of all was choice. And if I'm going to speak about choice, I want to say that I chose to be in this relationship. And as crazy as it sounds, I also at the same time chose to remain in relationship with George. Now, I will tell you from this place, I am not a woman who is polyamorous, and I am not a woman who today would choose to be in relationship with two men. But I am also not today the same frequency and tone of woman in all the ways that I was then. So I chose this path of expression and life force and coming alive and navigating from my own inner compass of what was a yes for me without running it by anybody else, without needing to stay within a certain container or paradigm of marriage and home and family. I also chose to continuously return to a space with George, to be with him. And there were times in all of this that I would do that and it didn't feel good. And there were times in all of this that I would do that and it felt incredible. To say that was confusing to my system is an understatement. And I also was engaging this experience in the full consciousness I possessed at the time. I did not have the level of wisdom I do now, or I did not have full access to it. I did not have the discernment. I did not have the knowing of these energetics I'm speaking about. I only had a lifetime, an entire span of marriage as a woman who felt deeply disconnected and unfulfilled, and yet also felt I was to stay in relationship with my husband. There was never a no. I've talked about this for George and I both. There was never a no or a signal to leave, to go. In the choosing of these, looking back, it was grace that neither of these two men ever, not one time, asked me to choose. George never said to me, "You're gone too much. I don't like it. I feel disconnected. This is not okay for me. You have to choose." The other man never said to me, "I want to create a life with you. And do you choose me or him?" That was not the dynamic. I was engaged with a man who very much believed that you follow the energy. And at the time, so did I. You follow the energy. And as long as the energy is alive, you stay. If the energy doesn't feel good, you leave. I believed it was possible I would be in and out of multiple relationships by that standard. I believed that eventually I was going to leave my marriage. I believed it was inevitable, and I was consistently taking pause. I was journaling. I was meditating. I was asking God, do I say anything? Is it now? And if so, what do I say to this man? If I am meant to leave this relationship, please give me the clarity, number one, and number two, the language for how to speak my truth into reality. I was never given that. I was never told go until after I had already left the other relationship. That was the first time I felt I need to leave. I need to leave my marriage. What I understand from here are multiple layers of what was happening. First of all, there was trauma in my system. There was an imprint of masculine from my childhood, from my earliest engagement with a man, which was my father. There was an imprint that was not whole. It was an imprint of emotional disconnect, physical absence, sexual fascination, and a beautifully uplifting charisma. And the energy of a man that people wanted to be around. So from that imprint, that is the lens through which I saw and experienced the masculine at the time. The imprint I encountered in this other relationship matched that of my father. I would understand far into, a year into the experience. I began to see very clear signs of, oh my gosh, That felt like when I was young and my dad did XYZ. And bit by bit, the pieces were revealed for me to understand. It was like walking a pathway. I've often seen this where there are stepping stones across a body of water, shrouded in the mist. And all I could do was take the next step. I didn't know what was there. I didn't know how my foot would land, and I didn't know what would rise up and into my system when I activated my foot upon that stone. So one by one, the pieces dropped in. I began to understand, oh my gosh, this is a distorted imprint of the masculine. I also very early on could sense, I felt in my body, I had visions, I had somatic responses to past lives with this man, karmic imprints between our beings, unfinished business that for a very long time, because I was also sort of under the spell of what New Age paradigms call twin flame energetics. And so in the twin flame energetics, there's a runner and there's a chaser, and it's a natural cycle of running and chasing until they draw closer and closer together as they are healing and clearing the imprints and eventually become that one divine union in partnership. So as we would go through the ups and downs of triggers and imprints and disconnect and reconnecting, which was all incredibly sensational, as we were navigating that, the belief in my system was it's because of this insecurity in me and this wound in him and my wound and his trigger. And even as we are igniting those over and over and over again, my sense was that we were clearing them. And I genuinely believed we were going to eventually progress to being together. And that kept me in it. It kept the energy of possibility alive in me, and it was delusional. If I encountered the same experience today, I would know in a heartbeat there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. This belief system does not align with mine, which I will tell you today, I firmly, deeply desire, am living, and believe we are designed, many of us, not all, I can't speak for everyone, for committed, deepening, creative, long-term partnership. At the time, I did not believe that. I actually threw it out the window. Didn't work for me. So I moved on to the next belief and paradigm, which was divine union, twin flame love, divine masculine, divine feminine, which is absolutely lovely. However, in the mainstream spiritual community of divine masculine, divine feminine, there are distortions. There is a weaving in of continuing to cycle trauma and karma. And in my experience, that did not stop until I stepped out. In fact, it went from being in a cycle of every few weeks, maybe a couple of months, to every 6 weeks, to every 4 weeks, to every 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week, days, until I could no longer stay in it. It was destroying me. Because the reality of being in a perpetual cycle of this is it will siphon your life force. We absolutely have healing to do on our path, and we are not meant to forever process our wounds. There's movement from that and into creation. We don't have to go looking for what is wrong. in the moment we become triggered. It will present itself to us. And I was in a perpetual pattern of, oh my gosh, that doesn't feel good. Where's my insecurity? Excavating it, looking for it, trying to dig it out, desperately needing to fix it so that I could be okay in this relationship. It didn't occur to me for a long time that this simply was not the relationship for me. The euphoria, the filling up of my empty places was too good. It was too good. It was too alive, and certainly much more so in the beginning. There was an exit point, and likely many exit points along the way. I could not sense nor understand them. And I was terrified. If I leave this man in this relationship, I will never feel this again. Women, I am here to tell you that's a lie. It is a lie. And while I have not again felt the sensational, ecstatic, out of my body, constantly channeling, constantly connecting, constantly seeking to hold that frequency, which is impossible, burnt me out. I lost weight. People wondered if I was ill. I couldn't keep myself together by the end. I was broken, blown apart intentionally. Additionally, what I know about myself very clearly now is I carry a devotional feminine template. Perhaps not every woman does, but many do. And this is part of the Scarlet Woman series Arlia and I are bringing through this season. It's connected to Aphrodite, Venus, the energetics of deep, deep feminine love and eros and sensuality and expression and a desire within her being, an innate desire to be in devotion to the masculine. And that is as God or divine being, as masculine cosmic energetics, and in physical relationship with a man. I always knew I was made for this. From the time I was a young girl, I felt these energies. I was drawn to the masculine, from boys to men, to father figures, to lover energetics. I was always moving toward that, always feeling, I want that. I desire that. I connect to that. I understand that. And so I was seeking a place to put that devotion, and it did not exist in my everyday life, especially now that my children were grown and I wasn't in mama mode on a regular basis, because we can certainly give our devotion to our children, can't we? Well, they were grown and gone. It senses very much like the energies of Rumi, Rumi's poetry, Rumi's love, Rumi's enamored energy with the divine, and also Saint Teresa of Avila, who wrote extensively of how arid and dry and alone and disconnected she felt when she couldn't sense or feel or deepen in with God. She had her own ecstatic experiences with the energy of God, and she had multiple times where she felt alone and disconnected. That is the energy of the feminine mystic. And that is the energy I carry. And it absolutely will and must have a place in my life. At the time, I believed that had to be only with and through a man. I didn't have access to, I didn't even know how to gain access to my own deep sensuality, my own desire for expression and creativity and lovemaking, physical, sexual lovemaking, but also energetic communion that created more love within myself and the world. I didn't know how to do that for myself. I believed it had to be from and with and through a man. Enter a man who knew how to bring that alive in women. That was the gift for me in this. And I believe I was meant to connect with that. I can't tell you now what my best path would have been because I lived the path I did. I don't feel guilty. I'm not sorry I chose it. I certainly do not love the chaos it created for people that I love. And I understand, and George himself would tell you, we wouldn't be here if this hadn't happened. It was a wake-up call for both of us in very different ways. Another piece that came into this is the whole Western fascination with tantric energy. And through this experience, I was introduced more deeply to that, but in a way that was bound with sexuality, freedom of sexuality, free sexual expression. I knew by this point I wasn't poly, and yet I was engaging in relationship with someone who would make no apology to me that in his truth, he was energetically polyamorous, which caused me deep agony because that is not my proper partnership alignment. I am not designed to be in relationship with a man who desires and believes he is made for intimate relationship with multiple women on any level. I am made to deepen in with one. And I mean deepen in all the ways. There are ways that we intimately connect in our world with our brothers and our fathers and friends and confidants. But there are also very clear signals for how deeply intimate we become with them. Certainly if they're not our family. And I did not understand those signals. I only knew it was taboo. I only knew that this energy would rise in me. And because I was married, it was wrong. It was wrong to follow it. It was wrong to feel it. And the only man I could go to was my husband. And I did over and over again from the time I was young. And it was met with nothing. Nothing. And I needed more. And I still need more. Yet now I can source the foundational layers of that within myself to not become desperate to have that experience with a man, with my husband, which allows him to grow and deepen and expand as himself in his own way. The euphoria that I experienced kept me in it. I will also say I believe there was an addiction to how good it could be. And in moments, it really was that good. And yet the bigger overarching truth was that I was living in the potential for when he XYZ, the potential for when I was no longer jealous, for when I wasn't insecure if there was a young woman around, for when I trusted that he did want to be with me. All of that was illusion. and not grounded in reality. I'm not made for that. I'm not made to be with a man whose energy goes in many other places towards sensual, ripe for sensual and sexual activation, feminine women. I could not handle that. And I believed it was because I needed to be fixed. And when I finally left and had time to heal, I understood it was because it was a misalignment. It was an alignment that was feeding my wounds. What initially fed my hunger, I would follow those threads and understand beneath the hunger, it was feeding the desperation of the pain. And that is never a healthy place to be. When we are feeding our desperation, there's something deeper than that going on that needs our attention. And in this case, it wasn't a wound. It was a misalignment that I resisted acknowledging until I had no choice. By my own standards, I had no choice. I could not continue to twist and contort to stay in a relationship that even by the end, any of the sexual potency, the divine potency, the spiritual energy had all been drained out. It was gone. It was now a delusion, a fantasy. And that was a big piece of it as well. All of what I believed and understood about love and relationship and sexuality and intimacy and connection, absolutely, yes, had come alive in my system. But then as I felt it, as I opened, what I discovered within my psyche, within my subconscious, were distortions that were mine to clear. Just a few more points and we'll wrap it up. How did I know when to speak the revelation is a question some of you have asked me. So along this process, probably a year before I left the experience, I began to get downloads and it would come in very clearly. You need to communicate this to George. And initially they were things that now seem so simple. George, I am married to this beautiful work that is so connected to nature. On a mystical level, I am in partnership with this. As a woman, as a mystic, it's very easy for me to say that to a real earth man like George, who had no idea what was going on in my world. I could not find the words. It took me probably 2 weeks of asking, okay, God, you want me to say this? How? What are the words? How do I say it? And I wept through it. The only way that I knew it was time to tell George was because it dropped into me. We were getting divorced January 1st, 2020, talking about how to separate our lives. And the day before, I heard very clearly, Jacqueline, if you don't fully show yourself, are you sabotaging any remaining possibility of being with George? I loved him. I loved him. I loved parts of my life with him. I didn't want to leave, but I couldn't see any other way. I couldn't figure out how to close the gap of my expansion and spirituality and his earth consciousness. How the hell do I close this gap? And that would stay with me over the next many years. Let's see. 2 years, probably 2 years. It took me in through 2020 and even I would say into 2021 to figure out how the hell, as this deeply mystical, soulful woman, who is now activated and opened. How do I move into life with an earth man who explores none of these realms? And I'll speak more on that at a future time. But I simply chose over and over and over again until I fully came into trusting myself, trusting my choice to be with George. Through 2020, our experience was disruption. We moved, we traveled, we had no landing place or home. Everything in our world was disrupted. The life I had been living was gone. George's job gone. 2021 for me was doubt. Am I right? I got it wrong. I got it wrong in my marriage and I suffered. I went into this relationship. I thought it was everything. And I believed and I was in fantasy for part of that. How the hell do I trust myself now? How do I know I'm right? So 2021 was about doubt. And it wouldn't be until early 2022 that I cleared that. 2022 thus far, we have a few months to go, 2 months, 3 months at the time I'm recording this, is about discernment for me, like the full potency of discerning what is true. It's as though it has been germinating, fertilizing in my system, ripening. And I will tell you without a doubt, even in the moments, life with George isn't exactly as I desire it. I trust my choice to be with him. I know I belong right here. I'm going to close with this. There's so much I could say, but I want to keep it brief for you. In my current life, marriage, relationship, I continue to be and am really circling back into a clean, clear communion with the mystical woman that I am. George continues to be an earthman who navigates this world beautifully. Our coming together is not meant to reconstruct either one of us, but to bring together his masculine and my feminine in marriage, in partnership, in lovemaking and co-creation of the third thing, which is more love, intimacy, a new way of being in marriage. That is not the traditional, I do, these are my vows, I stay with you because I took vows, and is also not the mystical, if the energy isn't right, we don't stay, but a marrying of the two, which elevates the expression of divine marriage and creation on this planet right now, as we are evolving on every possible level into a new way of being through this age of Aquarius. If you are a woman navigating all of this and you have no idea what is true, how to connect with it, and how to trust yourself, I am here, and this is why I am telling my story. Some of the guide posts we have been taught that teach us and tell us, signal to us what is true, are incorrect or no longer valid. The pathway is deepening into your unique signature of woman. That has been my answer. Me. And not just me alone, but deepening into me and experiencing the truth of that in relationship and engagement with the other, with love, with divinity, with sexuality, with partnership, with creation, with expression. That is the pathway through, to go down and in, and not to instead leave your body and being in favor of another. There is no savior. I want to leave it there for today. I'm Jacqueline. This is the Intimate Feminine. If you desire to deepen in even more fully, I am here. I create virtual and in-person feminine immersions that are absolutely lovely. And you are welcome to connect with me at theintimatefeminine@gmail.com or visit my website. I don't quite have this information up there yet, but we're working on it. Much love to each of you, and thank you for taking this time to deepen in with me.
Thank you for sharing this time today. You can find and follow us on all major podcast platforms. We invite you to like, share, and be in touch. Find out more about Jacqueline and her work at JacquelineLRobinson.com. This is The Intimate Feminine, opening channels to deeper intimacy in sex, relationship, and love. This show is produced by Arlia Hoffman.